Welcome to the Products to Services podcast.
Hello, everyone. Dave, welcome to the Products to Services podcast. Happy to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cooling is one of the most underestimated global challenges today. It uses close to 20% of global electricity consumption, and this figure is rising and rising rapidly. So it's a big climate risk, but also a big business opportunity, right? And so one company is tackling this heads on, and this is KAER, KAER. So you're based in Singapore, and KAER is Asia's largest cooling as a service provider. And you've shifted from selling chillers to selling 21 or 23 degrees Celsius. And today I'm joined by Dave Markernes, which is a director at KAER, to unpack the key decisions, the operating model, and the customer first thinking behind that shift. Dave, for those that do not know you and do not know KAER, what does KAER do and what is your role?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. KAER is an air conditioning company, and we've been in the air conditioning business for about 70 or 80 years. And over that time, we sort of transitioned how we operate cooling and how we deliver cooling to our customers. But it's always been big sort of industrial chillers and cooling towers to commercial buildings. So we don't do the residential stuff. So shopping malls, offices, data centers, and hotels, that kind of a building. And we've always been trying to deliver air conditioning or cooling in the most sort of responsible way. So I think at the beginning of our journey, we were sort of a distributor of sort of the big air conditioning equipment. So the American chillers and Japanese chillers we were bringing into Asia and selling them. We then transitioned to becoming a sort of a turnkey contractor, so supply and install, almost like a system integrator, putting all the parts together. And then about 30 years ago, we moved into energy efficient cooling. So we would design and build systems that could operate very efficiently and then report those metrics back to our customers. So that's when we sort of started moving into more software and more data and more sort of outcome-based deliverables. And it was about 12 or 13 years ago now that we moved to cooling as a service, where we then own all of the cooling assets and we deliver them, the building owners, the temperatures and the conditions that they require. So I think with cooling as a service now, you're buying a deliverable. So you dictate, I want it to be 25 degrees or 23 degrees. If I'm a hotel, I want my guests to be able to define between 21 and 26. If I'm doing cold rooms, I want it to be, whatever temperature or requirements that you have. And then we provide the systems, we own the systems, they're on our balance sheet, and then we provide that cooling. For my role, so I've been with KAER for about 17 years. So I've sort of seen through the transition from being an energy efficiency air conditioning provider to transitioning to KAS, which we did in 2012. And my role now is I have two. So I look after our customer success team, which is a new function that we had to set up when we did KAS. So that wasn't a department we had previously. And that looks after our existing cooling as a service customers throughout Southeast Asia, kind of like a relationship management, account management like function. And then my other role is corporate communications. So I get to do things like this and talk about the business model and why we do it. And as part of that role, I sit on the SET Alliance Steering Committee, which many of your listeners may have come across before, essentially trying to support other companies either to transition to the as a service business model, because we believe that's the most sort of sustainable way to provide cooling, heating, lighting, many, many different building services, and also helping people procure the as a service business model as well. So I kind of dabble between existing customers and then, hopefully spreading the message and advocating for the business model.
Okay, so really evangelizing the as a service model at large. So just to recap here for all the listeners, so KAER, you're not selling chillers anymore. You really went away from selling chillers onto offering outcomes, temperature, right, to your customers. And this is a fundamental shift, right, that you underwent. So you said 12 years ago, so you shut down all legacy project sales and went all in cooling as a service. Most companies that we know try to keep both models alive. You didn't. What were the early cracks or customer signals that made you realize the old model wouldn't scale or wouldn't exist in the long run?
So I think when we first started it, when we offered our first KAS customer a KAS contract. So KAS is cooling as a service. We did still have the other, energy efficiency, optimization, green building certification kind of services and consultancy services. And and the turnkey stuff as well. So we would design and build for people to own themselves. We started offering KAER in 2012 as an idea. And it was actually about 3 or 4 years before we then made the decision to stop all of the other things. But for us, it was really data driven. If we looked at the best cooling systems we had, they were all under the KAER model. If we looked at the most carbon savings we had and the happiest our customers were, so we measure and we dabbled between NPS and CSAT scores with our customers. They were happiest under KAER. We saved the most carbon under KAER. Our financial model was better under KAER. So I think it kind of, the data kind of proved that the model was a better way to have the impact we wanted to have, both for our customers and for the sustainability impacts we were having. And also it was that kind of that recurring revenue, that sustainable kind of business, as opposed to the old world, which is very choppy, right? You have a lot of projects one year and no projects the next. It's kind of hard to manage your teams. So I think KAER kind of showed us that we could have the impact we wanted and we could sort of run our business better and therefore deliver better for our customers. And then that's when we kind of made the call to, look, let's stop all these other things. And KAER took a very aggressive approach to that because we wanted to put as much effort and focus as we could into cooling as a service. So actually we would have, customers coming to us saying, can you do green building consultancy services because you've done them for the last 15 years. Can you come and we can buy them off you? And we would say, no, sorry, we don't offer that anymore. It's kind of stopped completely. If you want to do cooling as a service, we'll do it for you. If you want to do green building services or consultancy services, we won't. And here's the list of all the people we used to compete with. Because I think that was one of the beauties of moving to cooling as a service is actually you shifted who your competitors were. And actually, we no longer competed with green mark consultancy businesses because we don't do that. We do it for our KAER customers. So we offer that in-house as part of the package. But if you want a standalone, you can go to any of the people we used to tender against. If you want a turnkey project and you don't want cooling as a service, well, here's the names of the people we used to bid against. We kind of became much more friendly with all of our competitors because I think now we were sort of putting all of these things together and offering a different business model, and we no longer really competed with them. So I think it was better for us as a business. It was better for our customers. It's better for the marketplace. But I think the biggest thing was, like I say, the impact we were having. KAER has been an energy savings business, an energy efficiency business for 30 years. And the impact we've been having, and all ESCOs are having, is just far too slow. And we keep seeing we have these meetings, COP 25, 26, 27, 28 now, where everyone keeps talking about how urgent the problem is. But the solution is not coming fast enough. And we saw that with KAER, that actually it is. And we can talk about that a little bit over this podcast, why the business model allows you to accelerate the adoption of low carbon cooling. Because that's the problem. Like low carbon cooling or even no carbon cooling is possible. There are case studies across the world where it's there. The problem is the adoption of the technology is lacking. And it's too slow. So I think, we made the decision to stop everything else and just do cooling as a service. And then as we expanded throughout Southeast Asia, it's the only offering that we have.
Okay, super interesting. For the listeners out there, you mentioned ESCO. Just for those, ESCO is energy service companies. So basically companies that are active in energy efficient solutions, but that are also financing those projects. Dave, you just mentioned that as a service, cooling as a service, but as a service, equipment as a service models in general, are a way to scale more rapidly low carbon cooling adoption. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so I think and this is where I think the business model is so powerful, right? So, if let's say, for example, we have 2 buildings. Sorry, where are you sat at the moment? Where are you?
Brussels.
And so you're in Brussels, and let's say you look after a school in Brussels, and let's say I look after a data center in Singapore. We both want the same thing. We both want 24 degrees and we both want low carbon or no carbon cooling. The outcome we want is the same. How we would go about doing that and delivering that for our buildings is completely different. The cooling system I would build is different to the one you would build. The requirements for the buildings are different. The sort of legal framework throughout the countries we work in is different. The requirements are different. So essentially, we want the same thing, but we don't get it the same way, which means let's say I crack the code and I have low carbon cooling in my data center in Singapore, you can't go do the exact same thing in your school in Brussels because it will be the wrong chillers, it'll be with the wrong system, it'll be the wrong sizing, and you won't have low carbon cooling. So you can't share. There's not a technology solution here. Like there's hundreds of different technologies and hundreds of different buildings types, and there's not one size that connects them all. So this is where the market is now. Very fragmented technology and very fragmented customers. And they're all trying to figure out this together. And it's really hard and it's really complicated. So that's why we're struggling. Cooling as a service companies sit in the middle, and they sort of bridge all the technology guys and all of the building guys. And they say, look, I know how to deliver what you want using these different bits of technology. Because it's our business and our passion, we like learning about new technology and new things. I think a lot of building owners can get very overwhelmed with, I've got to learn this whole new language. I've got to do all these new things. And the technology keeps changing. The requirements keep changing. The legislation keeps changing. So it's actually a very daunting task to sort of take this on. And the capital that they have, they want to invest in growing their business and keeping their customers happy. They don't want to invest it in back of house things. Cooling as service providers sit in the middle. And because cooling is their business, they are happy to invest in it, invest in technology, invest in software, invest in people to deliver better cooling, because that's their profit center. So you move a cost center to a profit center, and then you sit in the middle between. So now when any building plugs in to the cooling as a service network that we have, they get access to the same outcome, low carbon cooling. Now, we will use different chillers, we will use different cooling towers, sometimes totally different designs. So we might use passive displacement cooling in some places. We might use big industrial chillers, we might use small chillers, the technology is different, but the outcome is the same. So I think that's kind of one thing. You put everything together and you sell the output. The other thing is that now one of the most important things when you're delivering low carbon cooling is data. And machine learning has been a buzzword. I think people are kind of bored of hearing about it now, but it's so important in cooling. Just buying the right technology does not give you low carbon cooling. You need to buy the right technology, and you need to collect the data on it, and you need to run it and operate it based on that data. So because we now have, 10, 20, 30, 50 buildings that are all plugged into this one digital network, they can all learn from each other. They can all train our digital model. So our AI platform that we built to optimize cooling systems now is trained on buildings in Pune, in India, in Mumbai, in KL, in Penang, in Singapore, in Surabaya, in Jakarta, in Bali. So all of this data comes together, and then each sort of building can learn from each other. And so actually the performance of our systems improve over time. So usually when you would think, if you're not so familiar with cooling, you would imagine buy the most expensive kit at the beginning, and it'll be great when it starts, and it'll deteriorate over time and get less and less efficient. Actually, that's not true. You can buy normal kit, and you do have to buy recent technology, but then you gather data, and actually efficiency improves over time because you can operate it better. So I think cooling as a service allows you to sort of put all of these things together, simplify what customers are buying, and then the hard, complex part is the burden of that is on the person that likes doing it. Like oddly, we have 75 engineers that love answering these problems, building AI platforms for optimizing cooling systems, running chillers differently, looking at data. So we have all this data. We have a performance team that just looks at it and gives insights, and then they now have data scientists that then build automatic algorithms that can tell us the insights without the people. So I think that's sort of the key reason why it's such a powerful business model. And everything I just said is not specific to cooling, right? It's heating, lighting to some extent. Anything that you have a large operational component, I think is better for as a service. So maybe lighting is a bit simpler because it's more of a CapEx, I guess, issue that people have going to the latest technology. But yeah, anything else where you need operations to remain efficient as a service is an absolutely beautiful business model.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, operations and where there is potential for energy savings in the end, where the outcome is clear, priceable to the customer, and when there's a recurring pain, right? The recurring need for services, as you said, for operations behind it, those are good candidates for as a service. I really want to go back into the tech and data aspect very shortly with you and talk about that one. But just coming back shortly on the leadership talk that we had on during our previous meetings, you also mentioned that whenever you did the transformation, the CEO back then said all the people that are currently working at KAER in this new model from CapEx towards cooling as a service, they will still have a job right there. And so there will be a new job essentially for everyone. How did this work out? So going from an organization that is selling projects, but also in mostly a CapEx way, project sales, going towards cooling as a service, and then telling the team everyone will have a new job. How was this experienced?
So I think the move to cooling as a service was, I think, embraced by everyone. The vision of the company to transition to an as a service business was everyone was presented the data. Why are we doing this? What is the impact? What is the reason for it? And I think everyone was on board with and aligned with that vision. So I think that's really important to make sure that, you have a very clear reason for doing what you're doing. And now, when we talk about what KAER does, we say we are the CAS people. You can define our strategy in like 3 sentences. We do cooling as a service. We want that to be the model of choice for buildings in Asia. So I think everyone wanted or understood why we were doing what we were doing, and sort of a positive step. The second thing was everyone was given the opportunity to fit into that new model. So I remember it very vividly. So we had our leadership team had an offsite meeting, and we had a whiteboard with post-it notes of everyone on it on the left, and we had a whiteboard over here that was totally blank. And the CEO said, every post-it note that's on that whiteboard in the old structure goes onto this whiteboard in the new structure. And we don't leave until every post-it's on there somewhere. So it really was a kind of a positive. And that actually, oddly enough, the leaders liked that challenge. It's positive to be looking after your people and wanting to bring them with you on that journey. So we managed to achieve that in a pretty short period of time. Now, however, there are people that the jobs they were doing. So let's take, for example, green building consultancy services. We used to do maybe 50 or 60 a year, let's say, as an example. Then when we were doing cooling as a service, we said we're only doing it for our cooling as a service customers. So in year 1, we only had one customer. So we were only doing one green mark consultancy service. And then we built 2, 3, 4. Now we have, 40 or something. So in that time, if you were someone who wants to do green mark consultancy, you're not getting that much opportunity to do it. So we would give you a role in the new function. But if you said, look, I love green mark consultancy, this is what I want to be doing, and you guys aren't offering enough of that as an opportunity, then you would get some attrition that way, and some people would leave the organization that way. But it was done in a very sort of positive way and a very amicable way. And then what we would do is say, okay, that's great. Tell us where you're going. If we get asked for green mark work, we'll throw it your way. So I think it could be that very, that kind of good two-way partnership of doing it. And so we managed to do it with, no one from the leadership team, no one from the team at all getting upset, everyone being brought along, but then, some people moving on and bringing in new roles as well. Because I think that was the other thing, which is, we wanted to give people the opportunity to train and sort of move into new requirements. So as an example, I was in marketing, and they said, right, we now need we need a CS team, customer success. You can do that. So I, at that point, had no idea what a customer success team did. I'd never been in one. I didn't know what the function was. And then KAER said, okay, here's the training, here's the setup, here's the framework. You step into that role, and you build from there. And that was, 10 years ago now. So I think there was a lot of training required. There was a lot of hand-holding required to bring people along. But actually, for our journey, it was really, really positive. And I think it was positive because everyone from the CEO down knew why we were doing it and agreed with that. That was the vision.
It's a very strong leadership, and everyone adhered to it, jumped into the boat, and it's really transformed how the whole organization, the whole structure, new roles being created. That's good to hear. That's great. That's inspirational. Coming back to data and tech that you mentioned, I'd be very curious to hear from you how your data and tech stack architecture looks like now, but also how it evolved over time, over the last 10, 12 years. What did you start with, and how does it look like today? Because I guess one of the functions that has been steadily increasing, or departments, is kind of this increased capacity in data, AI, machine learning. As you said, how does your data stack look like, and how has it evolved?
So I think in the early stages, because we had scale and we had more buildings coming onto the model, it really has allowed us to justify increasing our spend and R&D into the tech we were using. But I think the early part of the journey, we really spent that time and effort into investing in tools that were better for us as opposed to tools that are better for customers. So for example, our control system on cooling systems, really optimizing that and upgrading that, looking at alarms protocols and escalation protocols. So the golden rule with mechanical equipment, at some point it will fail. So how do you manage that? So what is the technology we were using to get alarms on status of equipment, rapid response requirements, case management, escalation matrices, and closing tickets and managing that with customers. So we invested a lot on controls and rapid response and ticketing, sort of case management sort of systems. And then the big one was machine learning and AI around optimization. But if you think about that, and we would talk to customers about it. We have AI because everyone said they had AI, and the customer would say, "Well, I don't care. Like, well, that doesn't do anything for me. That's good for you. I'm pleased you don't have to look at data all the time, and you can use AI to it. But what is that good for me?" And I think so. After 4 or 5 years, we then said, "Okay, we've got the technology for us. It's not fit for purpose at all for our customers." So what we used to do is cooling is a mission critical requirement for all buildings. In Southeast Asia, if the air conditioning goes down, the building is empty. It's uninhabitable. So if you have a shopping mall with no aircon, the shopping mall's. So what we then wanted to do was invest in technology which allowed our customers to transparently see what we were doing. What we did in the first instance was we would give them access to the BMS, so you can see the building management system. But actually, that's not great for security, and it's not great for a user experience from the customer. So we built what we call KAER Connect, which is essentially our user interface, an app that you log on online, you can see exactly what's happening with your cooling system. You can see what the temperatures are across your entire building. You can see what they are now. You could see what they were at 6 p.m. 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday. And you can sort of audit anything to do with comfort conditions in your space and the way the equipment's operating. You can see that in a very user-friendly manner. So think about there's lots of apps on your phones. Maybe it's for your telcos that you use or your utility companies that you use, which kind of shows you what your consumption is, how you're operating, your monthly bills. So we built that. I mean, that was a big sort of change for us. And that was the first time we built something for our customers as opposed to building it for us. We then built things like invoicing engines where the data from our cooling systems goes straight to our ERP system, automatically generates invoices, automatically goes to customers, automatically gets uploaded into KAER Connect. So automating sort of the workflows for any touch point with our customer. We then looked at doing integrations with our customers' tech stacks. So I think this is one of the big learnings for me was that I always thought as we were building this tech stack that you'd have to build your own because you need one platform where everything is. And I think that's a massive mistake in my opinion. I think you need to move to a hybrid tech stack where if there is something in the market that's best in class, you should use that and integrate it into your tech stack. Don't try and rebuild it. So there's green building dashboard companies. So we would then build APIs to then put our data into those green building dashboards. We haven't built a green building dashboard because there are other companies that just do that better. There are scheduling platforms. So, for example, we have an education campus which schedules their classes. And what we've done is we've integrated that with our control system such that when they book a class, the aircon turns on. When the class is finished, the aircon turns off. And so we're building in sort of these integrations as opposed to we didn't build a new scheduling software because it wouldn't be as good and it would be kind of clunky because that's not what we're great at. I think the other one is, we talked a lot about data and insights. Tableau is the data visualization software that we use. And so our performance team, we didn't build the data visualization module. We just used Tableau and we mapped all of our data to it. And now all of our data sits on, I think we're on Microsoft Azure servers now. That's sort of in Tableau's online servers or cloud servers. And that's accessible by all of our engineers all of the time using Tableau. So we're no longer in a world where there's so much proprietary software and you need to build your own. And I think because there's no way, there's so many different requirements, right? Data analytics, user experience. We did build the customer experience app because there wasn't one of those. We did build the artificial intelligence program because there wasn't one of those. There are now other ones on the market which people can use. So I would say if you're a small company doing it now, don't build your own, just use someone else's. I think even today, was it today or recently, Apple said they're not going to build their own Siri kind of engine. They're going to use the Google engine. It just shows you that you don't need to build your own stuff. If there's better stuff out there that delivers a better customer experience, use it to focus on your customer experience. So now we have this kind of very hybrid-based tech stack. I mentioned the escalation and alarms. So we use Opsgenie, which I think is actually transferring to a Jira product. That's an Atlassian product. So we linked our control system, which then if there's any mechanical issues with our machines or if there are any service level issues with our machines, it then sends alarms to Opsgenie, and then we run all of that through the Opsgenie platform, which is, it's like I say, it's not a KAER product. So I think that for me is the biggest learning, which is find the best in class and find a way to put it together. And today, they all talk to each other. I'm not an IT guy, so I can't go into the details of it, but they all are open platform. They all talk to each other. They all can do integrations. They all can do APIs and stuff. That for me is definitely the way forward. And then focus on building the technology you need. So the artificial intelligence platform we use is called Bricks, BRIQS, and we built that, and we have data scientists and data engineers who continually improve that product, but we don't sell it. We just use it for our CAS customers.
Okay.
And so that's the thing that our customers don't see. It doesn't matter. All we do is we report the carbon. So they see KAER Connect and they see this how much carbon I'm saving. How I do it, that's my problem. It's not their problem. It's not
and
their
this is your
concern.
IP. And that's your IP behind it. No, super interesting. Great approach, I think. Outsourcing basically, or using from third parties anything that is not core or not specific to your own IP.
We built that KAER Connect platform where the sort of motto behind it was we want to give our customers convenience and transparency. So convenience to see what they wanted when they wanted it. So a 24-hour app. Obviously, you can upload it, open the app whenever you wish. And then transparency was that key one, which is moving from a black box approach to a glass box approach. So you don't come into the box, right? The cooling is up to me. I run the equipment. I buy the equipment. It's on my balance sheet. That's sort of my box, and your scope is not in there. But you can see in. So you can see what the chillers are. You can see what the capacities are. You can see how it's operating. And again, that was the KAER Connect ethos behind it. So I think customers want, even though it might not be their scope of work and they've outsourced that to a third party, they want to be able to see in, especially for the first time if they haven't done cooling as a service before. And what you find is if you look at the metrics of these particular pages in our KAER Connect platform, the first week they're on it every day. Second week they're on it every other day. After a month, they're not on those pages because everything is fine. So I think that's a confidence in the journey or confidence in the transition that you have to be aware of.
The first weeks have to be perfect, and then they only go back essentially if there's a problem. Otherwise, they don't connect. But this is something we hear from a lot of different cases. You're like, it's not only in cooling, it's basically they will connect at the beginning, they play with it, and then never again, let's say, in case everything is well.
Yeah, it's like the kitchen analogy, right? If you go to your favorite Italian restaurant and you say, "Can I come in the kitchen?" and they say, "No, you can't come in here." Why can't I come in there? What's in there? But if you have a glass panel and all the chefs are behind and you can see into the kitchen and it's clean and everyone's kind of happy, you feel much more confident as a punter in that restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about pricing, SLAs, contracts. You have something very particular. So you offer full flexibility and there's no minimum usage, nor in terms of what they use in cooling, nor in the contract duration, if I'm not mistaken. How do you manage this risk? This is a huge financial risk for you.
Yeah, so to be clear, so what we do is, so our contracts are 15 years, but they can be renewed at any point in time, or they can be terminated at any point in time. So we don't lock in our customers for a duration of time. And we also don't put an end tenure that it has to finish at a particular time. The other side is that there's no minimum or maximum consumption. Nowhere in the contract does it have a minimum. And also nowhere in the contract does it have a maximum. We will deliver whatever cooling you require. Now, of course, there are space constraints that are there. So for example, if you have a chiller plant room that can only fit 2 chillers in it, I can't put in a third one. I physically can't do it on your site. So you do have to just be a little bit aware of what are the physical constraints on your site. But we've never, ever had a situation where you can't increase capacity or in some cases decrease capacity. So how do you manage that risk? The majority of companies that would be moving into as a service models, they would want to put that risk back to the customer. And how you would do that is you'd have penalties if you don't consume enough. You would have maximum requirements and your cost might change or your price might change if they overuse, like demand charges and things like that. And you would have lock-in periods. We manage that business risk through the business model. So when we were starting, that was a big risk because we only had one customer in Singapore. So if their consumption dropped, we would be in trouble. That risk evaporates when you have a diverse portfolio across multiple markets and across multiple asset classes. So during COVID, when essentially the commercial buildings of the world were shut down, they were all shut down at different times and for different time periods. And cooling also still has to be delivered, especially in this part of the world, because of humidity control and because of mold growing in these buildings. So even if there's no one in a shopping mall, you still need to run the cooling to a certain extent to dehumidify and manage that space. So when we had offices in Singapore were closed because everyone was working from home, data centers were going through the roof because everyone was working from home and using those, Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all of these sort of digital tools. We actually had our data centers consumption went soaring during COVID, even when our shopping halls went down. So you can manage it through that. In terms of space constraints, so we had a give you an example. We had a data center which had space to put 4 chillers on their rooftop. And so we'd already installed 2. We were going to put in 4 of the same size machine. So we'd put in 2 350-ton machines, and we were going to put in another 2 350-ton machines. So we're going to have 4 350s. And after we'd installed 2, their consumption went through the roof. We said, okay, let's change these 2 machines. Instead of putting in these, will double the size. The biggest we can put in that space are 700 tons. So then we had 2 350s and 2 700s. The consumption went up again. So we said, okay, let's take the 2 350s off the roof and put on where they were. Now the maximum capacity we can have is 4 700. So totally fine. It does all the cooling for the building. It's fully kitted out. It's data center, the whole place now. So that's absolutely fine. So what do I do with those 2 machines, those 2 350s? Because they were only 2 years old. Or 3 years old. So we just deployed them into other assets. So you have this kind of plug and play approach where you can move what used to be considered a physical locked in asset is no longer with cooling as a service considered a locked in asset. Most buildings will design a cooling system before the building is built, if it's a new construction, and they will guess what they're going to need, and they are stuck with it for the next 20 years until they have to replace their cooling system. With cooling as a service, you're not stuck with anything. It now becomes this very flexible approach where chillers can be moved around, cooling towers can be moved around. We've done it at data centers, we've done it at shopping malls, we've done it in offices, hotels. When some machines are end of life in one, there's a great example. We had a government project here where they wanted to change 3 machines to be more efficient because the energy efficiency is a huge drive in Singapore. So what we did is we said, okay, we can take those 3 machines and they're not very efficient, but they're still super reliable, right? So there's still embedded carbon in these machines. You can still get use out of them, but we can use them as standby machines. So even if you have an end of life from an efficiency standpoint machine, you can then deploy that as a standby. For people not familiar with cooling, we work on sort of an N+1 design sort of schedule. There's always 1 chiller that's on standby. But if the other chillers are down for maintenance or tripping or whatever, this standby machine can come on. That standby machine is never on, right? So it doesn't need to be efficient because it's never operating. If you do have a machine down and you then have to run it, okay, it's not efficient for 2 days, 3 days, but you then get that offline again, get the efficient machine back up and running. Once you have a portfolio, you now have a lot more to play with, and you have a huge amount of business risk is just taken totally off your plate because it's absorbed by the business model. And I think that's a great thing. Always try and find ways, take business risk off your customers and don't keep them with you. Just pass them on to the business model, and that's great. In the early days, you've got to take it on yourself, and that's the risk that you take. But as you grow, that sort of risk goes away. There are certain things where you can't, what is the business risk on, for example, like utility tariffs and water tariffs and the cost of doing business. So those are kind of things that are risks anyway for everyone in every business. So you can just have ways in your contract to, for example, peg your rate somehow to the electricity tariffs and water tariffs or CPI in your market or things like that. So I think it's don't add risk to your customer, take it off them. And if there are things where you need to share it, have just very clear mechanisms that both parties are happy with, that you can sort of share that risk together.
Super, super interesting. I really like also this reusability of the assets. And as you said, cooling systems were seen as a type of immovable asset, part of the building, and that you can in the end repurpose it and you make a movable asset out of an immovable asset in the end. That's good to see.
So on that one, sorry, so I talked about an existing building, but you can also do it in new construction. So we built a cooling system for a shopping mall 7 years ago, and the design was for 5 machines. We installed 4 only, and we said we have a standby plinth. We have the piping was designed for a 5th. The way that you designed it with isolation valves, etc., means that, and with the electrical capacity, means that you can add in another chiller without any disruption to operations. It can be 24-hour operations, no issue. And so now with that particular, so a lot of malls in Asia now are putting in a lot more food and beverage because everyone's buying stuff online. So you don't need so many retail shops, but you need more food. And that's what brings people to the shopping malls. When you bring more food and beverage into the shopping malls, the cooling requirements increase because there's a lot more exhaust air and the heat in those spaces. So in that particular instance, we've looked at modeling and saying, look, in 6 months' time, if you do this retrofit to all these food and beverage outlets, you're going to need another machine. We'll put it in for you. There'll be absolutely no disruption. Your pricing remains all the same. You're just going to use more cooling. So it sort of, it allows you as the the provider, you're not upset when the requirements go up and you have to buy a new machine because that's your business. Whereas if you're the owner of the asset, you're like, oh God, I've got to spend more capex on a new plant, which I only built the plant 7 years ago. People are going to ask, why are you now expanding it? Did you get it wrong previously? So in order to not get it wrong, you overbuild in the beginning, and then you just don't run the machines and they're not super efficient, and that's okay. It's kind of a hidden problem. Whereas undersizing is very much an open problem. So that's why every cooling system is oversized for new construction. But with cooling as a service, you don't have to, because you have the opportunity to come back and add.
True flexibility. That's cool. That's cool to hear. What about the financing? Who does the financing? Do you create different SPVs, so special purpose vehicles? Do you have external investors? Do you finance everything yourself? Do you do bank financing? A mix of all of them?
Yeah, so I think the short answer is that it is a mix, and I think it's sort of been a bit of a journey from financing it ourselves, which obviously as a company that didn't used to own millions of dollars of assets on our balance sheet, that was difficult, and that sort of hampers your growth, right? You can't grow at the speed you need to if you have to finance it yourselves. So that was the first way. That proves the principle and proves the concept. Then you sort of go to get bank financing. But then when you look at anything to do with sustainability and financing of new technology or energy efficiency like outcomes, which a lot of people talk about green loans and sustainability linked loans. One of the problems that banks have is they don't have two things. One is they don't have confidence in what you're doing. If it's a new technology, and then how do I know it's going to work? And you're usually a small business. So that's the first. The second is, how do I prove it? How do I benchmark it? How do I know what the energy savings are? It's actually quite a complicated thing to prove. It's an easy thing to say, I'm going to give you $50,000 savings per year, but how do you actually measure it, and how do you prove it, and how do you prove that that was attributable to what you did as opposed to other external factors? So that's actually really complicated. So banks are struggling with that. And they're also struggling with if you're doing proof of concept stuff, generally the lending size is small, right? So you're doing a small building here, a small building here. So is a bank or an institutional like investor going to get all of that risk, all of that complexity, and really invest the time to understanding what you're doing so that they can lend you $1 million? Well, it's not really worth it. But if you can put together 10 projects and now it's worth $25 million of debt that you want to get, okay, now it makes more sense for the big institutional banks and financiers to come in, understand it, and start putting money into it. So that was the kind of journey. It was us on ourselves, one or two banks really that we had good relationships with that supported us and helped us, and then moved into bundling, and then now people know the business model, so they're quite happy. We then went to so last year, super lucky, we got some great investment partners and growth partners that came on board, and their expertise in finances and raising capital and helping us deploy capital into these sort of sustainable revenue streams has been a massive game changer for us. So that's why we're now expanding a lot more out of Singapore into Indonesia, Malaysia, and India as our 3 key markets, and then potentially looking at some others as well further down the track. So we now have, I think people are looking for places to deploy capital into green investments and green real estate investments. The money is there. You just need a vehicle which can allow them to have confidence to do that. So that was kind of our journey.
Okay, cool. Interesting. Speaking about expansion in the end, what you mentioned in the India, Indonesia. So scaling cooling as a service requires choices about the markets, the assets types. And I mean, India and Indonesia, I guess the choice was not random, right? It was data driven. But what specific data points guided you in making that decision, or those decisions of going into
so I
those
think
markets?
it was a mixture of external and internal factors that would drive that. So I think from an internal perspective, places where we have operated in the past and had good support networks with chiller manufacturers and service companies and contracting companies, etc. So there's a lot of different people in our ecosystem that are required to come together and work together to provide cooling as a service.
Okay, interesting. If we would look at one market in particular and then look at different customer segments, would you say that there's certain characteristics of customers which are more inclined to as a service models than others?
I wouldn't say from an asset class perspective, because I think it's really based on the person in the organization. Are they looking for as a service solutions across their organization? So I wouldn't say there's a particular asset class which is pro as a service versus not. However, I would maybe say some of the mission critical data center like applications, high spec manufacturing like applications, they generally have the contractors they've worked with and known for years. They might have global agreements. So they're probably not going to step outside that network. If that network started offering cooling as a service or other as a service options, that would probably be fine. But I doubt they would go with a player they hadn't worked with before for that reason. So you need all of these players to move into the as a service offering. But other than that, yeah, it's really, it's shopping malls, offices, and hotels, I think, are the three big ones for us, just because they make up so much of the built environment and there's a huge impact you can have in terms of sustainability. But to your point is you need people in the organization who want to look at this business model, because it is still a new business model for a lot of people. So we've been doing it for 12, 13 years. We'll turn up to a shopping mall in Delhi and they've never heard of it. So it seems risky because of that. So you need people in the organization that are saying, let's look at that. And that's why your contract's important, right? No lock-in periods, no, don't put business risk onto your customer, put it onto you and the business model.
Super interesting. Speaking about the people within your customers, what roles do those as a service champions usually have?
So obviously you've got your head of engineering or head of operations, depending on the type of asset class you're working with. So they are essentially the ones that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. So they have to be very confident and comfortable with you as an organization and your team. And then you're talking C-suite, CFO level and COO and CEO level. Is it a strategic business decision to move to as-a-service business models? And I think more CEOs and CFOs are seeing that they can have a competitive advantage in their business and what they're offering if they are asset light and outsource all of these back of house things to other people. So just like I said, right, I don't build a huge team that looks after our servers. I outsource that to Microsoft. And I can do my job better and focus on my customers because I outsource that to a company that's really good at offering data as a service. So I think a lot of CEOs and CFOs are now saying, strategically, we need to move to these asset-light business models. So that's the first. And then they will then sort of dovetail with their engineering team to say, okay, are you confident that KAER can deliver this cooling? Are you confident with their technology? Are you confident with their people? Are you confident with their response recovery systems? And that's where you have that kind of two tiers.
Okay. Very interesting one.
And I think just on that one, so it wasn't exactly your question, but when you talk about moving to cooling as a service, there is sometimes this apprehension or this perceived apprehension at the engineering level that, you're outsourcing something that I used to do myself. So is my job in some sort of jeopardy here? But it depends, I guess, on the markets you have. And it might not be the same in Europe or the US, but in Asia for sure. Essentially, what building owners do today is they outsource it all, but just to different parties. You outsource it to a consultant who will then help you with the design or help you run a tender. You will then outsource it to a contractor to build it. You'll then outsource it to a service company to operate it and maintain it. And they will outsource stuff, manpower. They will outsource. Sometimes they'll go back to the chiller manufacturers, the OEMs for servicing and things like that. So you're basically outsourcing it to multiple different parties. So you're accountable and responsible. And if the cooling doesn't work, you're the only one who's sort of left holding the can, because the consultant will point to the contractor will put it to the service and maintenance person. Everyone's pointing to each other and no one's fixing anything. But actually with cooling as a service, you outsource all of those things to one party, which therefore is accountable for, it's got to be 24 degrees. If it's not 24 degrees, I don't care who designed it. I don't care who built it. I don't care who's operating it. I don't care who's repairing it. It's got to be 24 degrees. So I think that's some customers sort of, when they first hear about the model, they're a little bit worried. But then when they hear about what the transition actually means, it's the same thing. It's just one accountable party.
So the responsibility really shifts back to you, and there's only you being responsible. And then the aspect of manpower, I think it's harder and harder pretty much everywhere around the world to find expertise and manpower related to operations and technical manpower. And this model allows customers to decrease their own, let's say, needs for manpower in terms of operations, which probably a lot of companies are happy about. Every transformation has lessons and missteps to a certain degree, right? Let's finish this discussion on how it might help other companies that are exploring as a service models for their future. What has been the most difficult mindset shift that leaders must make to succeed with as a service, according to you?
I would say, I think one thing, we made the decision to move to cooling as a service as quickly as we could. There was that transition period of the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. I think as much as you can, I mean, depending on where you are as a business, if you're a startup company, just offer as a service. Don't bother with the old world. If you've been in the old world for multiple years, you might not have that luxury. And we didn't have that luxury. And the bigger you are as a company, the less of that luxury that you have. So if you're a huge chiller manufacturer or you're a big company that's been offering these solutions as products for so long, it's very difficult to just say, well, we're not doing that anymore. Billions of dollars of revenue is going to go to the floor, and then we're going to slowly build up our as a service offering. It's not that simple. But what I would say is that you need to really have a plan for how you're going to phase that move or that shift, and don't drink the Kool-Aid and get too excited about your own brilliance. Cooling as a service is a fantastic model. So we were thinking, right, if I offer them the old way of turnkey and then offer you cooling as a service, you'll pick cooling as a service every time because this is the fantastic model that we've built and we pioneered and it's amazing. But it's also new. It is so easy to go with the old way. I'll think about that. I'll put it off till next time. But my current CEO, my current job, I'm not going to take the risk. I'm going to just do it the old way. So if you offer two solutions, even if as a service is a future, don't think that it's not going to be tempting for your customers to go back to the old way of doing things. And so we did a process where, I mean, if I take you to one customer journey, we did the old way for them for years. So we've worked with them for 10 years in the old way of doing things. We then came along with cooling as a service, said, "You want to do it?" And they said, "Absolutely not. Just do the old way." And we said, "Okay, we'll do the old way, but next time we'll give you two options." And then the next time a tender came up, we said, "Here's the old way, here's the new way. What about the new way?" And they said, "Absolutely not. We're not doing the new way. Just do the old way." Because you prove that you're good at the old way. So it might be counterintuitive. You might sort of say, "I want to bring people on this journey," but by keeping them in the old way, you prove that that's a good way to do it. Unless you do terribly, and then they don't want to work with you as a company. So we then went to, okay, we're only offering you as a service now. And will you do it for this development? And they did, and that was fine. The next development came up. We said, okay, only as a service. They said, we want two options. We said, no, and we only offer as a service. And they said, okay, then we can't work with you. And then you have to have that bravery or that courage to say, okay, that's fine. If you don't want to move to this model, that is 100% fine. But then we can't offer the old way just because that's the way you'd like to procure it. And then they said, okay, fine. And then they came back and said, actually, okay, we will look at the new model. So it takes a lot of hand-holding with your customers, a lot of sort of confidence and trust from your customers to do something like this. And we would always say, look, the engineering's the same, the technology's the same. What's the difference? But that there is that trust and that confidence in you as now a fully accountable outsourced partner that you need to address. So as you're looking at doing this, focus on those customers where you have that already, bring them on the journey, show them the benefits. And actually, no one that we've worked with has gone back now. Everyone has stayed with as a service. New developments have come on to as a service. No one's sort of gone back to the old way. But that's tough. I think that's a hard one.
Wow, cool. Damn, this was a very interesting conversation. Dave, thank you. Really deep thank you for sharing KAER's and your remarkable story of how you transformed from being if I may say, a traditional HVAC player towards being an innovative pioneer, selling degrees in the end and selling those outcomes. So I think for any industrial leader that listened to this episode, there's a lot of interesting insights and shows that the as a service model and the cooling as a service model is really a powerful strategy and business model for the years to come. If someone wants to reach out to you, what is the best way to reach out to you?
So I think there are kind of two resources I would give. I think if you're in the cooling world, you can come to KAER.com, KAER.com, and you can find us through that. You can reach out to me. So my email address is david.mckernis@kaer.com. But I think if you're looking at transitioning either your organization or other as a service businesses, I think the SET Alliance is probably the go-to resource for you. So that's setalliance.org. A whole team of people there who have expertise in transitioning to the model. There's so many tools available to you now. I think when we made this shift, as a service wasn't a thing. We actually called it KAER because we didn't know what it was. Only in 2017, someone said, this is actually as a service. And then we started calling it cooling as a service. So, but now that's not the case. There are tools available. There are contracts available. There's consultancy firms available. And I think that the SET Alliance is a great place.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave, for sharing this. We'll make sure to put that in the in the descriptions of the episode. To the listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe to the Products to Services podcast and visit p2sconsulting.com for more insights on subscription and as a service business models. Dave, thank you very much again, and talk to you soon.
Yeah, it's great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Products to Services podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe and listen to the other episodes. You can also follow us on our platforms to stay up to date. See you next time.